If you're already watching the UFC and want to get paid while doing it, this is the show for you. In this video, I'm going to go through the entire UFC fight card and give you my betting analysis, breakdowns, and predictions for every single fight on the card. And this week, we are in good old Seattle, Washington of the United States, where we have former middleweight champion Israel Adesanya trying to get back in the win column as he takes on streaking middleweight fighter Joe Pyfer. That is going to be a very, very interesting and intriguing matchup. Cannot wait to speak to you about that one. We also have a rematch on the cards in the co-main event as Alexia Grasso is taking on Maycee Barber. Mansur Abdul-Malik, another streaking middleweight fighter, taking on Yousri Belgaroui, hot off a massive knockout win over Bekov in his last fight. We got fan favorite Terrance McKinney on the card taking on Carl Nelson. We got Chase Hooper versus Lance Gibson Jr. and a bunch of other banging matchups all throughout the entire card. And I'm going to go through every single fight in this video, so run the intro and I'll see you on the other side. What's going on, lads? Welcome back to another edition of the lucrative MMA betting show. Very excited to talk to you about this one, as I always am, because I love MMA and I love making money on MMA. And I love helping people make money on MMA. And that's what these videos are designed for. We've been doing these videos for 6 years now, super consistently over the last 2, and we have put a hell of a lot of money in a hell of a lot of people's pockets, and that's what I'm going to try and do on this show today. So as I said, we got Israel Adesanya taking on Joe Pyfer, and Israel Adesanya is a very, very interesting fighter to break down because, you know, he's been there, he's done it all, and now he's in the tail end of his career. You know, I think even he would admit that. He doesn't have that many more fights in him. So anytime you get a fighter who was literally at the pinnacle of the sport, one of the best fighters that we've ever seen in the middleweight weight class, on a downtrend, it's definitely hard to judge their performances and judge their fighting level at the time because we don't know how far off the pinnacle they have dropped, you know, but we're going to get into that fight very soon. First of all, I want everyone to go down and click the subscribe button and click the like button. It's the free way and easy way that you can support me if you appreciate these videos that I make every week. Early videos as well. I do a lot of tape study for these videos. It takes a lot of time, and I'm basically putting not only my 20-hour of tape study knowledge in one video for you, but also my 10 years of consistently betting on MMA every single week in the video for you as well. So without further ado, we will get into the main event of the evening. And as I said, it is Israel Adesanya taking on Joe Bodybags Pyfer. So we've got Izzy Adesanya still with a stellar record in MMA despite his recent losses of 24 wins and 5 losses. Joe Pyfer, on the other hand, 15 wins, 5 losses. So the main event just happens to be the most closely lined fight on the entire fight card. At minus 115 odds for the favorite Israel Adesanya, with the underdog, if you can call it that, price tag of minus 105 odds. I mean, on some bookies, this fight is a straight pick of minus 110 apiece. So it tells you the bookies have no idea what's going to happen in this fight. But I have some idea, so let's get into it. Boy, oh boy, this is such a fantastic fight. Like, I want to give a disclaimer straight up. The disclaimer is that I am a fan of Israel Adesanya. I live in his home country of New Zealand. I'm always going to support, for the most part, the New Zealand fighters. Unless they're taking on some English fighters, then I might have to switch on the other side. That hasn't happened, I don't think, in Israel's career yet, and it isn't happening here, so I will be supporting and rooting for Israel Adesanya. I know people who are friends with him, I'm friends with them, etc., etc. So, you know, it is semi-close to home, so maybe my pick is a little bit biased or my breakdown's biased, but at the end of the day, boys, I'm a professional and I am here for the most part, or, you know, I'm mainly here to give you guys unbiased breakdowns that help put money in your pocket, as I said in the intro. So I'm going to do my best to be unbiased here. And let's start off with saying that Israel Adesanya is no longer in his top form. Israel Adesanya is on a back end of his career, and Israel Adesanya is not the man he once was in MMA. How's that for unbiased? I mean, it's obvious, right? Everybody knows this. And I think even Israel knows this himself. He's a very self-aware guy. I have listened to his interviews throughout his entire career. He has one of the strongest mindsets of the game. And he's one of the most honest fighters in the game. You know, even listening to some of his interviews for this fight, you know, he said how he was out of position in the Imavov fight. He was looking good, but he got caught, and he has no excuses. He can't be getting caught. There was an eye poke that happened before the knockout, and he didn't even use the eye poke as an excuse. He says, after the eye poke, I didn't reset myself correctly. That's on me. It's completely my fault. I got caught with a shot. He basically owns up to the defeat in full. So, you know, I think he's going to be able to accurately assess himself and understand that he's not at the top of his game anymore. Although seeing his recent performances, he's fought well in every single one of them. He's not looked wash in any one of them. So I feel like he's still going to have extreme confidence, even after having multiple losses in a row now. Like the fight against Nassourdine Imavov, he was looking great in that fight. He was winning the fight clearly. He looked really good in round 1. And he looked good in round 2 until he got caught with a brutal shot and knocked out. Now, on the one hand, it was bad to see because Israel, as always, basically had a rock chin. Alex Pereira couldn't even drop him, you know, with throwing the kitchen sink at him. So to see him get dropped and knocked out brutally by Nassourdine Imavov, he was still there. He had his faculties around him, but I mean, that was a bad drop and a bad knockout, you know. To see that happen, on the one hand, it's bad because you're like, oh damn, is Israel losing his durability? But on the other hand, the fight as a whole was going exactly as Izzy planned. You know, he was defending all the takedowns. He landed to the body, to the head, to the legs. He looked like a much better striker. So he was looking good in that fight. The fight before that against Dricus du Plessis, I thought he was looking fantastic up until he got choked out in round 4. You know, he was looking very, very good in that fight. So I think he'll look at those two fights and say, I'm still very, very high level fighter. I don't think he would probably have won those fights 5 years ago, you know, and I truly believe he would have beat Dricus and Nassourdine Imavov 5 years ago. I believe that. But at this point in time, even if he's looking good, he still loses those fights, you know. His fight before that against Sean Strickland, he didn't look good in that fight. But honestly, the knockdown in round 2 was kind of like a big moment. Outside of that, I do think Israel was, you know, he came back after that. He won a round, and I felt like it wasn't as dominant as people thought, you know, like the Sean Strickland fight wasn't as dominant for Sean as a lot of people thought. That's how I felt like, you know, he won rounds in that fight. It was still a semi-close fight outside of the knockdown. And I do think the knockdown changed the trajectory. We won't get on there though, because that is a deep rabbit hole. We can speak about that a lot. What I'm trying to say, boys, and in the fight before that, he knocked out Alex Pereira unconscious. No one's ever done it in the UFC. Alex has not lost to anyone except for one man in the middleweight division, Israel Adesanya. And the only other fight he lost for a narrow split decision, or a narrow decision against Magomed Ankalaev. That fight was scored 3-2. I thought it could have been 5-0. We won't go to that rabbit hole either. It was still a close decision. What I'm trying to say is Izzy is still performing at such a high level. He's now taking a big step down in competition against Joe Pyfer. Now let's speak about Joe Pyfer for a minute. I mean, Joe Pyfer burst onto the Dana White's Contender Series and UFC scene with Dana going viral by screaming, "Be Joe Pyfer."
If you want to get into the UFC and this is where you want to be Joe Pyfer. Be excited to be here. Be fired up to fight. Be Joe Pyfer and you will get into the UFC.
And that was because Joe Pyfer comes into the Dana White's Contender Series, puts it all on the line, very aggressive, gets a finish, and that's what Dana White liked to see, and it was kind of a meme since there. So he had some notoriety about his name since that day, and he has taken his loss in the UFC. You know, he fought Jack Hermansson. He got rushed up the rankings very quickly, got 3 wins in the UFC, and found himself fighting Jack Hermansson for a top 15, top 10 spot, and got the veteran lesson in that spot. You know, he looked very good in the early rounds, but he completely gassed out. It was a 5-round fight. It was a main event. They was pushing Joe Pyfer. They wanted Joe Pyfer to win that fight. They don't really care about Jack Hermansson in main events, let's be honest. But Jack Hermansson was able to weather the storm and, you know, piece up Joe Pyfer in the later rounds, round 3, 4, and 5. He was landing a lot of leg kicks. He was outmaneuvering Joe Pyfer. He was playing the matador to the ball, and he was able to get takedowns later on in the fight as well when Joe Pyfer was extremely tired. So that was the veteran lesson. And since then, Joe Pyfer has rebuilt very well. He's racked up wins against Marc-Andre Barriault, Kelvin Gastelum, and the latest one, Abbas Magomedov. Multiple finishes in that run as well. And Joe Pyfer is a finisher. I mean, most of his wins come via finish. He did decision Kelvin Gastelum, but in round 1 it looked like close to a 10-8 where he was knocking him down easily. Kelvin didn't have such a big head. It would have been a finish. Joe Pyfer has big power in his hands, especially early. He has good accuracy. He's not like winging shots completely wild. I think he picks his shots quite well. And he's a very heavy, big, strong grappler when he gets on top with legit jiu-jitsu. So the guy is a pretty well-rounded fighter. Something I still see in his game is his cardio is not that good. You know, I genuinely believe that. I mean, I think he's such a big guy oftentimes we see these huge middleweight prospects, their cardio is not that good. You know, sometimes it is when they're just complete freaks. I mean, Michael Morales potentially has good cardio, but even him, I do think he suffers a little bit. You know, not like Israel Adesanya probably has a lot better cardio than Michael Morales and than Joe Pyfer, just because he's not as big as those guys, you know? Like, he's leaner. It might not be the only reason, but you get what I'm trying to say. Joe Pyfer has a lot of muscle on him, and he has tired in multiple fights. I always go back to that Jonathan Patty fight, which happened, I mean, you're approaching eight years ago now. It's in 2019, I believe it was, when he got guillotine choked in round 2. He just completely gassed out in that fight, fell apart, and yeah, he got finished. That wasn't a good look. And then you go back and look at his fight against Jack Hermansson, you know, the next loss of his career. He lost against Dustin Stoltzfus on the first run of Contender Series, but I mean, that was a fluke. You know, he got slammed on his arm and it broke. Outside of that, the next true loss of his career, he gasses out against Jack Hermansson, as I mentioned, right? Wins the early rounds and gasses out. The next fight where he goes to decision against Kelvin Gastelum, he gasses out in that fight as well. And arguably, Kelvin wins round 2 and round 3, you know? So that fight could have been scored a draw. Or 29-28 Kelvin if you don't give the 10-8 first round to Joe Pyfer. Even though Joe Pyfer looked so dominant in that fight, somehow he still arguably could have lost it, you know? So it's like he's gassed out in all of these fights that have gone late, and I still feel like his gas tank isn't there. And this is another 5-round fight. If Israel Adesanya can survive the early going and the early beatdown that Joe Pyfer will definitely try to put on him and the early grappling onslaught, I feel like Israel outclasses Joe Pyfer in rounds 3, 4, and 5 and wins a decision, or even gets a late finish with body shots, body kicks, and maybe a question mark kick, you know, faking to the body and going up top. That's honestly how I see the fight playing out. And I think it's kind of an easy fight to break down, you know, which is like Joe Pyfer's going to be really good early, but gas out later in the fight. You know, I mean, he's done it every single time. I don't think he's going to completely gas to where he's got nothing left. I'm not saying that. I just feel like Izzy is so much better and sharper in the late rounds than Joe Pyfer. He's got way more experience going there anyway. And even at his age, on his downtrend, I still feel like Izzy is going to light him up in rounds 4 and round 5. You know, I really believe that. But are we going to get there? Izzy hasn't got there in his last fight. And in the fight before that, he got there, but then he got choked out in that round. You know, so is he what he once was? Is he what he once was? I don't think he is, but is he enough? Is he good enough to beat Joe Pyfer? You know, it's like the analogy that I always give with these fighters. Like, they're at the top of the mountain, right? Where Izzy was. And Joe Pyfer's never been at the top. He's like around the middle, right? And Israel Adesanya is definitely not at the top of the mountain now. He's coming down the mountain, right? Joe Pyfer's gradually creeping up, but he's still nowhere near the top. Have they met? Where do they cross each other on the mountain? Maybe Israel's still above him like here, but Israel might be dropping down. He might be just below him. Joe might be able to get him. And even if he's just a bit above him, Joe could still get him, because MMA's like that. The better fighter doesn't always win. So, like, how far has Izzy dropped down? That's what the fight comes down to. Because Izzy prime for prime against Joe Pyfer, he dominates Joe. You know, he dominates him and honestly finishes him. He probably finishes him. It's going to depend on Joe's toughness. I think Joe is very tough, but I feel like the late round finishes could be there for Israel Adesanya. So yeah, it's a very tough fight for me to break down, boys. Like, where is Israel mentally and where is he physically? You know, has he been in the gym? Has he been training hard? What does he really feel about the fight? And, you know, a lot of that information I am going to be able to get from the City Kickboxing room, from his teammates, from people that know him. I'm not going to come out and put that out publicly, you know, out of respect for my friends, but I will be looking into that quite heavily. Is he locked in? You know, is he just doing this for a paycheck, or does he really, really feel he can win the fight? Because I do think that's going to influence the fight quite heavily, and not just mentally though. Where is he physically? As I was doing my research on the narrative-based arguments for the fighters, because at times they are important. You know, has a fighter been going through bad injuries? You know, has a fighter been having a long layoff and maybe they've changed camps, they've got different training partners, these type of things. One thing I noticed is that a day ago, Joe Pyfer posted on Instagram that he has now found God and he is reborn in Christianity, right? So look, I'm not going to pretend like I know what this means for him fighting. What I can say is that it goes one of two ways for fighters when they are reborn through any religion, right? And I've seen it time and time again, and it goes one or two ways, not just for fighters, but for humans in general. Or not just humans in general, but like entrepreneurs, fighters, athletes, people that have to use a lot of themselves in their vocation. Let's put it that way, right? It's different just for people who work a normal job and they don't have to give a lot of themselves to what they're doing. But, you know, with fighters, it's not the same. And I have noticed that some of these fighters, you know, they find God, they find Jesus, and then they lose that killer instinct. They don't want to hurt their opponents anymore. And they lose that rage and aggression that they need in the cage, like Rory McDonald. I think Rory McDonald is a perfect example of this, and that's verified example, which you guys can go and Google right now. You know, Rory McDonald found Jesus, found Christ, good on him, and his MMA career kind of dipped after that. There are some fighters who do the opposite, you know, now they're fighting for something bigger. They're fighting for something bigger than themselves. I don't know how big Charles Oliveira was into Christianity when he was younger, but I know that he speaks about Christianity and Jesus after every single win, and it probably spurs him on to do more. It's the same thing with a family, boys. You know, you see these fighters get families, and sometimes they turn soft. Sometimes they fight harder because of their family. So I just wanted to give that information to you, because I always give you the most information possible, even though I'm not sure myself what it means. I guess if I had to say would I prefer to see it or not, I would prefer to not see it, because there's no chance of change there, right? Yes, there's a chance of upside, but I'd rather there be less of a chance of upside or downside and Joe just be the same guy he is. I'm happy for him on a personal level, but for a fighting level, putting my money on him, it's probably not what I want to see. In his interviews, he's saying that he doesn't care about social media anymore. He doesn't care what people say. He's consistently repeating this in all interviews. Because he has found God now. So yeah, it's just a little tidbit I wanted to tell you guys. On the other hand, we have Israel Adesanya, and during my research on him, like I said at the start, you know, he seems mentally locked in. He's very honest in his assessment with the Imavov fight. So yeah, it's going to be a very intriguing matchup, boys. I am going to pick Izzy Adesanya in this one. I do believe that Joe Pyfer will not finish him. And so if he doesn't finish him, I think that Israel Adesanya is going to win the late rounds. And honestly, could put him on a masterclass. I mean, at the end of the day, man, Israel Adesanya is just, he's been there and done it. He's fought the best, way better level of competition. Like, this is a big step up in competition for Joe Pyfer. And it's a big step down in competition for Izzy, in my opinion. It really is. You know, going from Strickland, Duplessis, and even Imavov to Joe Pyfer, a big step down. He deserves a step down, you know, because he's lost all those fights. But I do think it's a step down to where he can win the fight. Joe's going to look strong early. He may even take Israel down once or twice, but Israel has some of the best takedown defense in the game. And I actually think he's a decent survivor on the mat, although I don't think his jiu-jitsu is good. I think he's a good survivor, and I don't think he's going to get instantly submitted. You know, so yeah, I'm going to take Israel Adesanya to win this fight and to snap his win streak. Next up, we have Alexia Grasso taking on Maycee Barber. And as I said in the intro, this is a rematch. Alexia Grasso won the first fight, 29-28, losing the third round. So is it going to be a repeat of the first fight, or are we going to see something different? Alexia Grasso comes into this fight, 16 wins, one of them against Maycee, 5 losses, 1 draw. Maycee Barber, on the other hand, 15 wins with only 2 losses on her record. Currently, they have Maycee Barber as the minus 145 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Alexia Grasso sitting at plus 125 odds.
So let's get into this women's MMA contest, lads. A bunch of women's MMA fights on this card, but this is definitely the most high profile one. As you can see, I've swapped locations. I'm now back in my office, fully locked in to break this card down with you and this fight down. So one of the things I noticed when I was doing tape study for this fight is, and honestly, I noticed this every single week, boys, like without fail, is that you cannot trust your memory, right? So let's go on a little lucrative rant. Come along with me for a little lucrative rant, as I like to do at least one time in the show. It wouldn't be a show without a rant. So if you are doing tape study for MMA, boys, which I know a lot of you do, a lot of you don't, and you just listen to me, I'm doing the tape study for you, so you don't actually need to if you don't want to. But a lot of you do your tape study, right? And if you do tape study, but you only do it half and half, I'm here to warn you now that memory cannot be trusted. And that is something I notice every single week, and specifically noticed with this fight, Alexia Grasso versus Maycee Barber. And I'll explain what I mean. So in my head, in my memory, right, I thought that Alexia Grasso just pieced Maycee Barber up for round 1 and round 2. It was easy rounds. There was no argument that Maycee Barber won round 1 or round 2. She did nothing in those rounds. She just got boxed up, right? and then she dominated round 3. That was what happened in the fight in my memory. When I watched the fight back, I'm like, damn, round 1 is like close to a 50-50 fight. Round 3, Maycee Barber clearly wins, but it's not a dominant round. She tries hard. She gets tagged with some big shots. She gets reversed on the cage multiple times in that round. And then there's a whole grappling sequence where Alexia Grasso puts Maycee Barber in an armbar and a rear naked choke at the end of round 2 that I completely forgot. So while I was correct in some degree that yes, Maycee won round 3 and lost the first 2 rounds, the way I imagined those rounds going, they wasn't how those rounds actually went, right? So you cannot trust your memory when you're tape studying for MMA or when you're thinking about the fights, because oftentimes you will forget pivotal moments in rounds and in fights that could actually sway your decision when you're making your prediction on the next fight. So be very careful. If you haven't tape studied, but you're putting big money on these fighters, boys, you need to tape study. Do you need to tape study 30, 40 hours a week? No, but you do need to watch certain matchups more than once or like over your lifetime more than once, because you're going to forget how they go. So yeah, this is a rematch, boys, as I said, right? And these guys have fought before. It was a while back though, and both fighters have improved since then. Alexia Grasso actually went on to capture UFC gold after that Maycee Barber win, and she went on a great win streak. She ended up going on a 5-fight win streak, which culminated in the win against Valentina Shevchenko. She obviously drew with her in the rematch. And then she's been on a downtrend since then. She actually hasn't won a fight in the UFC since her Valentina Shevchenko title win in 2023. So you're talking about 3 years ago was the last win she got in the octagon, and that was for the title. Since then, she has only fought 3 times, twice against Valentina, the best women's MMA fighter in history, in my opinion. And she drew one of those fights and got dominated in the trilogy, the third time they fought. And then she lost against Natalia Silva in a semi-competitive matchup that she was clearly outgunned in. So she's been fighting the best of the best. I mean, Natalia could be a champion one day, and Valentina, as I said, best fighter ever, in my opinion. So there's no massive knock on her. But on the other hand, we got Maycee Barber, who has actually been on a very good streak since that fight. She's actually on a 7-fight win streak, and the last fight she lost was against Alexia Grasso. So after that fight, both girls have done extremely well. Maycee hasn't even lost. Alexia captured the championship, and now they're facing off against each other again. So you can't really make a higher level women's MMA fight than this. This is almost as high level as it gets. Honestly, looking at Maycee Barber's career and record, I'm very surprised she's only lost 2 times. In my head, she's lost like 4 or 5 times already. You know, because I do remember that Alexia Grasso defeat. I remember some fights where, in my opinion, she lost the fight clearly, but was still awarded the decision. Like the Andrea Lee fight, like the Miranda Maverick fight. You know, so if she lost those 2, you know, she bumps up to 4 losses. And even in her last fight against Karine Silva, it was a close fight. She's not really putting stamps on rounds. Now, the way she does put stamps on rounds is she has great cardio. You know, she pressures. She wins round 3 at an extremely high clip. The only round she won against Alexia in their first fight was round 3. So that's kind of how she wins fights. She dominates. But when I look at her overall skill set, I don't think it's that good. You know, like I don't think her jiu-jitsu is that good. I don't think her wrestling is very good. And I don't think her striking is very good. You know, so all 3 aspects of MMA, I don't think they're very good. But what is good is her will to win, her durability, her cardio, her activity, her pace, volume, pressure, confidence, physicality, very strong. You know, these things are always heavily in the favor of Maycee Barber in almost any fight she's ever fought. So while she lacks on the skill, she makes up with the intangibles. And as I always say, boys, there's only 3 things you need to look at to cap an MMA fight. That is the stylistics, statistics, and intangibles. And I do think that stylistic-wise, Maycee Barber doesn't blow anyone out of the water. She isn't that good there. With the intangibles, she's elite there. You know, she has a lot of intangibles that you need to become not only a UFC fighter, but a UFC champion. So this is a very intriguing matchup for me. Will Maycee Barber avenge the defeat, her last defeat, in this rematch this weekend? Alexia Grasso has been there, done it now. I do think she's on a bit of a downslide. Not because she's lost against the best fighters in the division in Valentina and Natalia, but just because she's been there, she's done it. She's not getting any younger. And I really do feel like she peaked in the Valentina first fight. And in the next 2 fights, I don't think she looked that good in those fights, honestly. And then the Natalia Silva fight, I don't think she looked great in. So I feel like she's peaked already. I don't think she's going to ever capture UFC gold again. And I don't think she's going to put on the performances she did back in the day, like when she was beating the likes of Maycee Barber, when she was beating and finishing Valentina Shevchenko, hurting her on the feet with her boxing, submitting her, stuff like that. I don't think she's ever going to get back to there, whereas I do feel like Maycee Barber's still improving, still getting better. She's only 27 years old, which is crazy. You know, when Maycee Barber came into the UFC, she was touted as one of the future champions of the division. Dana White loved her. And she had a couple of setbacks. She had a couple of band injuries. Like I remember her knee completely popping out of place. And, you know, she's been a little bit tumultuous since then. Up and down performances. Some fights that she won that she should have lost. But I do think she's improving. She's getting better. She's 27 years old, 5 years younger than Alexia Grasso at 32. And I don't think she's peaked yet. So I find myself leaning to the Maycee Barber side here. Not on skill, but on intangibles, on improvements. I mean, at the end of the day, boys, when they last fought, Maycee Barber was 22 years old. She's a 22-year-old child to some degree. You know what I mean? A very, very young girl. And Alexia Grasso was Maycee Barber's current age of 27. Now, Maycee Barber is the 27-year-old in the matchup, and Alexia Grasso is 32, which isn't old, but I do think Alexia Grasso is more of like a 36, 37-year-older, just in terms of fight years. She's been there, done it, champion, had setbacks, been hurt in the octagon, gone through grueling 5-round fights. The trilogy against Valentina definitely took a lot out of her. She had a fight booked against Rose Namajunas earlier in the year. She had to pull out of that one. I don't know what it is. It was some type of injury. Again, these are not great things. You see what I'm saying? Like 32 years old. The trilogy took a lot of out of her, pulling out of fights now because of injury. I think Maycee Barber, to win this fight, needs to do much of the same as she did last fight. But I think because I'm guessing that Alexia's not in her prime anymore and Maycee has improved, I think that doing what she did in her last fight will actually yield her better results. And so you asked me, James, what did she do in the last fight? Well, I kind of touched on it at the start of the breakdown, but Barber was pressing Alexia up into the cage a lot. She was clinch fighting for the majority of the fight. Almost all of her success came when Alexia was either pressed up against the cage or stood up with her back against the cage. You know, Barber would land big elbows and then strikes in the clinch. You know, she was very aggressive in the clinch. She got turned in the clinch a lot. Grasso won a lot of the clinch, but Barber did her best work on the feet, in the clinch, or up against the cage. Outside of that, it was the ground attacks and ground control of Maycee Barber. She got multiple takedowns in that fight. I remember 3 off the top of my head. But most of them came off court kicks, came up of strikes where Alexia was off balance. And as I said, Alexia did actually sweep Maycee Barber with an armbar and managed to put her in a rear naked choke, or at least take her back. It wasn't a rear naked choke, it was like a face crank. But, you know, Alexia's jiu-jitsu is superior to Maycee. You clearly saw it in that fight, and she was able to sweep Maycee, whereas Maycee, I don't really think is going to be able to sweep Grasso. I mean, maybe she could. She's very physical, but that's basically how the fight played out. I do feel like if Maycee Barber does the same thing, though, she could have more success. I think physically, Maycee has matured. You know, she's no longer the 22-year-old young girl. She's 27 years old now. I think a lot of the clinch positions that Maycee got in the first fight are going to serve her better here. She'll still get in those same clinch positions, but maybe she's a bit stronger now. Maybe she's harder to turn now. Maybe instead of throwing 1 or 2 elbows, now she throws 5 or 6 because she's not as scared at losing position because she's more dominant in the clinch. I mean, think about it logically, boys. Even if you guys don't train, you can kind of think of, and I know a lot of you do, a lot of you don't, it doesn't matter, but a lot of you can understand what I'm going to say conceptually, even if you don't train. So imagine you have someone in a clinch, right? You're up against the cage. If you are feeling physically dominant, right? Like you can throw them about, they're trying to get off the cage, but they're not really doing anything. You're going to be a little bit more open with your attacks. You're going to throw more knees. You're going to let the hands go and throw an elbow in close. Whereas if you're grappling with someone, you're clinching with someone, and it's a very 50-50 scenario. They're turning you, you're turning them. You can feel their strength. You know if you let go, they're going to probably grab hold of you. You ain't going to open up with your strikes and stuff. So I do feel like a lot of those positions that Maycee was in that she wasn't winning, she was like 50-50 and up against the cage, specifically in round 1 for like 3-4 minutes. I think Maycee will actually dominate those a lot more than she did in that fight. And so I think she can win the same type of fight, but do it better. I still think it's going to be a close fight. Alexia Grasso has her done on, honestly, in all skill sets. I don't think she's the better wrestler. I think she's probably on par. I do think she's the better striker, and I do think she has the better jiu-jitsu. So it's always going to make out for a close fight. But I have to pick the girl who's on the trajectory now, who hasn't been champion, who is still gunning to be champion. And one thing I've noticed in my narrative research as well, boys, as I always try and tell you the most information possible, is that Maycee Barber in multiple interviews now has been calling for the Alexia Grasso rematch. Now, I mean, it doesn't mean too much to me. What it does mean to me is that she's, you know, raring to go, and she believes she is going to win, and she's eager to avenge that loss. Now, for the most part, when you're listening to these interviews, the main things you want to look out for are red flags, right? The green flags don't mean anything. You know, fighters always say they had a great camp and stuff. You can't judge that. You don't know if they're lying or telling the truth. You don't really know, because no fighter is going to come out and say they had a bad camp or they want to retire or they're injured. If they do, then you have to listen to that. That's a red flag, right? So this is a green flag from Maycee, and I don't really listen to green flags in interviews, but it's still not a red flag. So for example, if I had seen an interview and Maycee's like, oh, I don't want to really fight her again, you know, the first fight was very tough, like I feel like I should be getting someone else, like that would be a red flag and I wouldn't like it. So she's doing the opposite of that. So while I don't take it as a positive, I know that she's ready and it's not a negative at all. So if anything, it's a neutral, right? / positive, neutral / positive. So that's good. I'm happy to see that in an interview. What I'm not happy to see is red flags. Anything else is kind of just neutral or positive. So I think Maycee Barber's going to come in here ready, and I am going to pick her to get the decision win and avenge her last loss of her MMA career against Alexia Grasso via decision.
Next up, we have a battle of the middleweight contenders, or at least streaking middleweight fighters who are looking to be contenders for the title, you know, in the next couple of years. We have Mansur Abdul-Malik versus Yousri Belgaroui. Mansur is an undefeated fighter, 9 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw, but that draw was a strange, controversial one against Cody Brundage. The result got overturned. Very strange circumstance there. Yousri Belgaroui, on the other hand, 9 wins, 3 losses. Currently, they have Mansur Abdul-Malik as the -135 favorite, as you would expect, with the underdog price tag on Yousri Belgaroui plus 115 odds.
Woo-hoo-hoo. This is a good one, boys. A great middleweight matchup. Very excited for this one. And I'm excited to talk to you about it as well. So I probably had one of the worst bets I've made last year when I bet Azamat Bekaev as a -225 favorite against Yousri Belgaroui. Me and the Elite Zone got absolutely rinsed on that one. Sorry, guys. We can't win it all. But that was a bad bet. And Yousri kind of had a breakout performance there. You know, before that fight, I knew he was a great striker, but I just felt like he had nothing when he finally gets taken down, which I still feel like that, if he gets flat backed. He's pretty good at getting up if he isn't controlled flat back on the mat. But I felt like if he gets put down flat back on the mat, he has no way to get up. And I still believe that, but Bekaev just wasn't the one to do it. You know, I also felt like he could be cracked on the chin over the top, which happened, but you know, he ate those shots and just pieced up Bekaev. I still feel like Yousri is going to get badly exposed one day with the takedowns, and it might even come here. He's been exposed before. If you go back and watch the Marco Tulio fight in round 3, gets taken down and has absolutely no idea what to do from bottom position. Now, I actually think he's getting way better at that, and it's hard to judge how better he has got at that because no one's really flat backed him since then. You know, I noticed during my digging throughout these guys' social media and training records that Yousri Belgaroui has trained with Sean Strickland and Alex Pereira with the wrestling a lot. So I'm going to put some footage on the screen now so you can watch it along with me, where Yousri Belgaroui and Sean Strickland are getting in some grappling and wrestling rounds, right? The reason I bring that up specifically is not because Sean's a great wrestler, or even though he is, to train with, but because Sean Strickland is one of the main training partners of Mansur Abdul-Malik. So it's an interesting crossover I saw there. Sean is going to have an insight into how Yousri deals with takedowns, the best takedowns to use on him, and just his grappling game in general that he can tell Mansur Abdul-Malik. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe Sean hates Mansur and loves Yousri. We don't really know just because they're in the same camp. But I would expect that Sean can give Mansur some insight into Yousri's grappling game that he saw in the training room together. I do think Mansur will need to go to the takedowns here. If it's a 15-minute kickboxing fight, he will lose. But I also feel like Mansur's raw physicality and power will keep Yousri's striking game at bay a lot. You know, there are some fights where I watch Yousri and I'm like, I wish he would push the pace a bit more, throw more volume. Like his second crack at Dana White's Contender Series against Taiga Iwasaki, who's a very low-level fighter in my opinion. It was quite a poor performance in my opinion from Yousri. You know, if he didn't get the third round stoppage, he would not have got signed by Dana White, even if he would have won the fight. You know, I honestly thought even with the finish, he's still not going to get signed. But I guess they want to make that Alex Pereira matchup, which I think is gone now. Alex moving up to heavyweight. But if you didn't know, Belgaroui actually actually fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing before. So I think, they was trying to make that matchup. He actually fought Israel Adesanya as well. So I think they wanted like another kickboxer crossover who could call out Israel, who could call out Alex on a run. He actually fought Alex 3 times and Israel twice. So I think they really wanted him in the UFC. So they was like, all right, we'll sign him, even though it was kind of a poor performance. There were lots of fouls in that fight, and it was just a strange fight in general. So sometimes he does have these weird performances. Like I said, in round 3, it was a very good fight against Tulio. He was doing well, but round 3 just doesn't know how to stand up, which was a bad look. But I do think he's improving. I think he's getting better heavily. And I think this is a great matchup. On the Mansur side, he also has had some strange performances. I mean, the fight against Cody Brundage was a pretty bad look up until round 3, where he just run through him. So much so that the entire community was calling it a potential fixed fight. That's what a lot of people were saying in the community. I'm not saying that personally, but a lot of people were saying that that's how bad it looked. It was just like a staring contest for most of the fight until round 3, where he just completely run him over with ease. And then that fight was overturned in weird manner. Obviously, we look at the Nick Klein fight as well. He was hurt very early in that fight by a Hail Mary spinning back elbow. So it's like he has had some sketchy moments. His level of competition has been a lot lower than Yousri Belgaroui. But I find myself leaning to the Mansur Abdul-Malik side here. I think his upside in the division is just as much as Belgaroui. I think they both have very big upside in the division, honestly. But something that you might not necessarily see on tape or doesn't stand out in some of his wins because he is quite flawed is Mansur's physicality is something to be marveled at. I do believe he's going to be by far the strongest fighter that Yousri Belgaroui has ever fought. The most physical fighter, the most fighter with the raw athletic gifts that Yousri has ever fought. And I think that we could see that win him the fight, honestly. As I said, I think Yousri's bottom game is pretty bad. If you completely flat back him, he's very good at getting back up to his feet fast. But if you are able to control him, which is like a lot of fighters, for the first 10 to 15 seconds, then I think you can control him for 2 minutes. If you don't control him in that first 10 seconds, he's very scrambly. He'll get back up to his feet straight away. And you've wasted all that energy on a takedown. But if you get that first 10 to 15 seconds, you've got him for 2-3 minutes, maybe even the entire round, like in the Marco Tulio fight. So, Mansur Abdul-Malik has the grappling in his back pocket, has the wrestling in his back pocket. And then on the feet, I think it's a very strange fight because I don't think Yousri is just going to walk him down and throw a million shots like he did against Bakoev, because I think he's going to be worried about the physicality, the athleticism, and the firepower coming back from such an elite athlete like Mansur Abdul-Malik. Instead, I feel like Belgaroui is going to jab, stay at range, try to have a slow-paced kickboxing affair with him. And in that fight, no one's really getting hurt that much. Yes, Belgaroui is pulling away, but it's not like putting stamps on it. Mansur needs to get one takedown and he's won the round in that type of fight, So that's how I see the fight playing out. And that's why I'm going to pick Mansur Abdul-Malik here. Because I feel like the striking fight that Yousri will fight is not going to be a high-paced one where he's walking him down like he did against many fighters in his career, but specifically against Azamat Bakoev in his last fight. I don't think he's going to fight that same game plan. I don't think he's going to be able to. But, it was evident in that Bakoev fight that he got gassed out and discouraged extremely early in that fight. And that allowed Yousri to pour on the pace and pressure as we moved into round 2. And then ultimately the beginning of round 3. I don't think Mansur's going to gas out like that. I don't think Mansur's going to get smashed to the body. I think Mansur is way more athletic, way more powerful, and has more power than Azamat. So I think the dynamic of the striking is going to be different, where it's just like a slow-paced kickboxing fight on the outside. And Mansur is the one with the power advantage on the feet in his hands. He's the one with the explosive advantage. And he's also the one with the wrestling advantage. So it's going to be a good fight. Yousri is not a bitch. He's never going to fold. In all of his losses, and I've watched them all, he competed in all of them very, very well. But I do think that the same thing happens here where, he does compete decently well, but Mansur just uses his athleticism to edge out some of these rounds. And it's a good learning fight for him, but he does ultimately win. That's my prediction. Mansur Abdul-Malik via decision. Quick one before we move on, boys. Everything I do and bet is tracked via a third party. Every bet, every result, every win, every loss, nothing is deleted, nothing is hidden. So when I talk about performance, I'm talking about real numbers, not just guesses or random predictions on how I will do. For example, based on my full tracked history since I first started betting and tracking my bets back in late 2019, if a $10,000 bankroll started and was run through this model and compounded, it would have generated $864,600 $637. Now that's real tracked historical performance. Now that's not a guarantee of any results. There's no such thing as guaranteed wins in sports betting. There is variance, there are drawdowns, and results will fluctuate. But it shows you what the model has been capable of when followed properly over time. If you want the exact bets that I place weekly or monthly, then you can join via the link in my bio. It's sublaunch.com/lucrative MMA. These are track numbers, fully transparent, unlike almost everybody else in the industry.
Next up, very exciting fight here. Julian Juicy J Erosa taking on Lerryan Douglas. Juicy J coming into this fight 31 wins, 12 losses. Extremely veteran MMA record. Lerryan Douglas, on the other hand, 13 wins with 5 losses. Currently, they have Lerryan Douglas, a massive -285 favorite with the underdog price tag on Juicy J Erosa sitting at +245 odds.
Yeah, so this is a really fun fight, guys. Lerryan Douglas making his UFC debut fresh off the heels of one of the most brutal knockouts you'll ever see in Dana White's Contenders history. I mean, the way he put Cam Teague out with that left hook, I mean, we don't see that too often on Dana White's Contender Series. Look, we see a lot of brutal knockouts on Dana White's Contender Series, but that is up there with the best of the bunch. And it leads me to speak about Lerryan Douglas's left hook, because if you go back and look at his regional career, which you need to do if you're tape studying him, because he's never fought in the UFC before, right? You will see that he is fighting good guys on the regional scene, by the way, and hurting almost every single one of them with what? Specifically, the left hook. His left hook is what starts almost all of his knockouts, and honestly, what ends most of his knockouts. You know, his left hook is a very powerful weapon, much like Alex Pereira. I'm not saying they're, have the same striking style or the same level of power, but they definitely rely on the left hook heavily in their own striking style. Lerryan Douglas is a good boxer. He has a good right hand as well, but the left hook is really where he puts people out. If you go, and you know what, that's what he's actually doing. He's putting people out, he's putting people unconscious. That's why I want to speak about the left hook specifically, because it's not just a normal punch. He's not just hurting guys with this. He's putting people out. Cam Teague, we know what happened to him with the left hook, and it was the left hook that started it as well. He dropped Cam Teague twice in that fight. One time unconscious, but the time before that, it was with a right hand, like an overhand right or a right straight, whatever it was. But it was actually started by the left hook. The left hook froze him, and then he comes through with the right hand, which is what you'll see in a lot of Alex Pereira's fights as well. Like in his Israel Adesanya fight where he knocked him out. Yeah, he knocked him out with a right hook, or I don't know what the last punch was before the referee jumped in, but it was actually the left hook that stopped it. And you'll see that with Lerryan a lot. Even if it's the right hand that ends it or a knee that ends it or something, it's the left hand that started it all. And if you watch his fight against Javier Reyes, he puts him unconscious with the left hook. All he needs is one shot. If you watch his fight against Isaac Thompson, a fight that he lost, he also hurts him with a left hook in round 1. He freezes him a little bit. Now, that fight was a little bit of a concern, because I'm not going to say he quit in that fight, but Isaac Thompson is a very good fighter, first of all, right? But he was kind of piecing him up a little bit, like Isaac Thompson was piecing him up. He was just looking like the better fighter. He landed a head kick, and Lerryan Douglas basically just collapsed to the ground after the head kick. But it was a delayed response. So he got kicked in the head, and then he had time to field the head kick, and then he kind of just curled up into a ball and said, you know what, I don't want to fight anymore. So look, at the end of the day, if you get hit with the right shot, it can shut down the best of men, But I don't love to see it when you get hit with a shot and then 5 seconds later you curl to the ground when your opponents start walking forward because you just don't want to fight anymore. You go back and look at his regional scene career. There was another time where, he got hit with a body shot. This was 10 years ago, so the guy was 20 years old. He got hit with a body shot, and again, he just curled up into a ball and said, I don't want to fight anymore. So I don't want to call him a quitter. I would never do that, because I don't think he is a quitter. I just feel like maybe his body language is poor when he gets hit with the right shot, whereas there's some other fighters who might push forward. Even like his opponent this weekend, Julian Erosa. Yeah, you can knock that guy out, but he's never really getting hurt and kind of just cowering away. Like, I've never really seen that from him. And maybe I have to go back and look at his career. Maybe it has happened, but there's definitely guys out there who you need to put unconscious to actually finish them. And with Lerryan Douglas, it's not the same thing, In this fight, and the way I see this playing out, I see Lerryan Douglas as having way too much firepower, and his boxing is too good to not knock out Julian Erosa here. I mean, Julian Erosa has made a career of dragging his opponents into deep water and finishing them at the back end. But Lerryan Douglas, in my opinion, has good cardio. He's not fragile outside of if you land the perfect shot on him, and Erosa doesn't have much power to do that, in my opinion. And I don't think Erosa has the grappling or wrestling to take him down, because Lerryan looks like he has good anti-grappling, good anti-wrestling, and he looks very strong, and he looks like he has solid balance. And so it's going to be a fight stuck on the feet, and Erosa basically has to put crazy amounts of volume on him without getting hurt or finished to win the fight. And while it can happen, because Lerryan is making his UFC debut, I honestly don't see it happening. I think Lerryan's going to knock him out, probably with a left hook, and probably in round one. You know, he's coming into his prime now. Lerryan is 30 years old. Julian Erosa's like 36 or something. He's been there, done it in the UFC. Erosa's been out of the octagon since May. And one of the reasons why he was out of the octagon was because in his last fight against Costa, which was a competitive fight, he broke his orbital in that fight. Right. So now he's going up against someone who hits really hard and who probably could break his orbital again. I don't think that's necessarily going to be great news. And yeah, I just feel like Lerryan's got too much firepower to not win this one. So like I said, he's going to have to his pants, being that it's a UFC debut, to lose the fight. I don't think he's going to do that, though. I think he's going to catch Erosa on the chin and win via knockout.
Next up, we have Terrance McKinney versus Carl Nelson in what should always be a banger. Anytime Terrance steps in the octagon, you know it's a banger. So Terrance McKinney coming into this fight, 17-8 record. Carl Nelson, on the other hand, very similar record, 17-6 with one draw. Currently, they have Terrance McKinney, the minus 140 favorite with the underdog price tag on Carl Nelson, plus 120 odds.
Here we go. Fight of the night, best fight of the year. Like anytime Terrance McKinney gets in there, we know it's going to be an absolute banger. And Terrance McKinney has never gone over 1.5 rounds. Every single time he gets into the octagon, his fights end fast. So I'm going to go fast with this one. In any Terrance McKinney fight, he has the chance to win the fight. I don't care who he's fighting. He's got like a 10 to 20% chance of beating anybody in the entire division, even the champion. He can knock out Ilia Topuria. He's got like a 10% chance to do it just because of how he fights. It's crazy. He goes forward, flying knees. He's one of the fastest fighters you'd ever get in a lightweight division, and he's basically kill or be killed. You know, if he doesn't get you out of there in the first 2 minutes, he's basically going to lose the fight. And so it gives him an upside against anyone in the division. We saw he fought our boy Chris Duncan in his last fight, and he was tagging up Chris early in that fight, you know, and then what happens? He gasses out, he gets broken, and the true fighter wins that fight, which is Chris Duncan. And I will say Carl Nelson has more dog in him, you know, but I do feel like we could see a somewhat repeat of that Chris Duncan fight, at least early, when Terrance is actually tagging him quite heavily with the boxing, and Carl Nelson is, you know, maybe looking to clinch up and looking to shoot. And I mean, it's just pick your poison from there. Is Terrance going to get him out, or is Carl going to weather the storm for 4 minutes? And if he does, Carl's going to get him out in round 2 or the end of round 1. I mean, that's literally what's going to happen. Boys, don't bet on Terrance McKinney in this fight. Don't bet on Carl Nelson in this fight. Bet on the under 1.5 rounds. I'm going to pick Terrance McKinney as a pure pick, but I don't want to spend long on this one because Terrance McKinney isn't the type of fighter that you spend long breaking down, because he doesn't fight long, and I don't need to break the fight down for long. He's a very easy fighter to break down. He's going to be faster than Carl Nelson early. He's going to hit harder, or at least on par, than Carl Nelson early. He could jump on the back, and he's so explosive and athletic, he can wrap up a submission early, but I don't see him doing well if this fight goes past 5 minutes. So that's really it. I do think that the speed advantage and the fact that Carl Nelson, in my opinion, isn't a full-time MMA fighter anymore. He's moved a lot into hunting, and I think he's heavily focused on that these days. And also, I have seen him finished multiple times. I mean, every single time he loses, he gets finished. And I've also seen him finished in the first round by Steve Garcia not too long ago. Because of all those reasons, I'm going to pick McKinney to get it done in round 1. But I mean, you know, there's no way I'm betting on McKinney money line. I mean, just bet McKinney round 1. Like, there's no point, right? McKinney money line and McKinney round 1 is literally, like, they're the same thing. They're the same bet, or they have been for every single fight of his career. I think he did get one late finish, but you get what I'm trying to say, boys. Instead of betting Carl Nelson or Terrance McKinney, we're just going to bet the under 1.5 rounds at minus 300 because it should be minus 700. And that's it. We're going to move on. Terrance McKinney via round 1 finish is my official prediction. I'll say KO.
Next up, we have women's MMA action with Casey O'Neill taking on Gabriella Fernandes. Actually, very excited for this fight, boys. Casey O'Neill coming into this fight with a record of 10-2. Gabriella Fernandes, on the other hand, has a record of 11 wins, 3 losses. Currently, they have Gabriella Fernandes as the slight favorite at minus 135 odds, with the underdog price tag on Casey O'Neill sitting at plus 115.
This is a women's MMA banger. It really is. You know, I think at the end of this fight, we're all going to be saying, damn, that was a good fight. Because anytime Casey O'Neill steps into the octagon, it's basically an exciting fight. And for the most part, anytime Gabriella Fernandes steps into the octagon, it's an exciting fight. So I think if they fight against each other, it's going to be an exciting fight. You know, Casey O'Neill has had an up and down career. She came into the UFC and I felt like she could be something pretty decent because her pace, pressure, and tenacity is quite high level for women's MMA. And if you have that in women's MMA, you can go far. You can build an entire career off just pushing a crazy pace that fighters cannot deal with. You can do that in men's MMA as well. It's just a lot rarer in women's MMA for whatever reason. Now, Casey O'Neill has struggled sometimes with her physicality. I remember that fight against Ariane Lipski where she kind of just got bullied in that fight, got smashed on the feet early. She got hurt there and then she was ultimately submitted. She took a year off after that fight though. She came back against Luana Santos and looked improved. Honestly, she looked like she improved after that year layoff and I'm excited to see her come into the octagon again. I don't know why she's taken such a long time off again. I need to do my due diligence there to see why she took such a long break again, even longer than the last one. I'm expecting to see some improvements again, honestly, because I did see them last time she took a break. Is it going to be enough to beat someone like Gabriella Fernandes? Maybe. I think she's going to have to come back and beat her in the third round like she was used to doing. I mean, Casey O'Neill, initially when she came into the UFC, was making a career of not looking that great early, but then her pace and pressure and tenacity kind of just overwhelmed opponents. I kind of feel she needs to do that here. She's going up against Gabriella Fernandes, who's stronger than her, who's more physical than her, who hits harder than her, and who's a better striker than her. Casey definitely has the jiu-jitsu advantage, but I can't necessarily say she has the wrestling advantage. I don't even think she has the strength to get it down there, at least early. She can definitely do it with pace and pressure and maybe utilizing her cardio advantage. But I think early, Gabriella Fernandes is going to be the much better striker, hit way harder and be more physical. So I think Casey's going to need to go back to her old roots of mounting a comeback as the fight goes on. Just is she able to do that? Gabriella Fernandes is a very, very good fighter. She beat Kong Wang, which is an amazing win, in my opinion. She's also beat fighters like Carly Judice, which is another very good win. And I feel like the days of her losses against Jasmine Jazadovicius when she got taken down multiple times and then in a subsequent fight against Teresa Bleda are somewhat over. Am I saying she would beat those girls in a rerun? Possibly, but I just feel like she's improved her takedown defense since then, for sure. And I think both of those girls are better wrestlers than Casey O'Neill, right? And she's improved since then. So I just don't think that Casey O'Neill is going to be able to get her down early. She's going to need to jump on her back. She's going to need to get a cheeky trip, or she's going to need her to get tired, which can happen. Gabriella Fernandes is all physicality, so she definitely gets tired as she goes into the later rounds. We've seen it time and time again, and basically every fight she goes late, she gets more tired. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens after the 7.5 minute mark, because I do think Casey can mount a comeback then, but I do think Gabriella Fernandes is going to be piecing her up in the early going, man. And I think she could even hurt her, honestly. And just because she has such a big advantage early, I have to pick Gabriella Fernandes to win this fight. I think she's a very good fighter. I think this is a very good fight overall. I just don't know if Casey is a good enough athlete to win this fight. I don't know if she has enough physicality to win this fight. I think she can come back and maybe win round 3, but I think she's going to be 2 rounds down by then. I think she could even be dropped and hurt by then. I mean, if Lipski can drop and hurt you, Gabriella Fernandes throws some of the same shots, which is sharp, straight shots in the pocket with big power. I do think Lipski maybe a little bit more volume, maybe throws a little bit faster. I'll have to, go back and watch Lipski. It's been a while, but you get what I'm trying to say. What I've seen from Casey O'Neill's career is getting beat up early, getting beat to the punch, not being a good striker. And I think the same thing's going to happen here. And I can't say that I'm confident that Casey O'Neill's going to come back in round 3 and get a finish. Because if she's 2-0 down, she needs a finish now. Even if she wins round 3, it's 29-28 loss, unless she gets a 10-8 or something like that. So seeing that the line's so close, I'm definitely going to pick Gabriella Fernandes here. I think this is kind of a good matchup for her outside of maybe round 3. I think she can kind of style on Casey O'Neill early in round 1, and then round 2 will be up to Casey if she can get the tide turning, but she may just be beat up too bad from that. She may be hurt too much from that, but by the time round 2, round 3 comes around, she may have been hurt badly. Her nose should be bloodied up. She could be dropped once or twice, and that also affects your cardio. Once you get hurt and pieced up and honestly physically dominated early, it can affect your cardio both mentally and physically. Physically because you've been hurt to the body, you've been beat up, you're bleeding, you can't breathe properly. But mentally because you've been beat up, you're bleeding, you can't breathe properly. Mentally it affects your cardio. You don't have that energy in your step. If you see your opponent wilting, then that's when you get the second win. That's when you get more cardio. So I just feel like it's an uphill battle for Casey O'Neill, that she can potentially mount a comeback win, but I'm not picking her to do it. I'm picking Gabriella Fernandes to win this fight, probably via decision, but maybe even gets a knockdown in the early rounds.
Next up, we got Chase Hooper versus Lance Gibson Jr. Chase Hooper coming into this fight, 16 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw. Lance Gibson Jr. makes his second fight in the UFC after losing his debut to Bobby Green via split decision. He has a record of 9 wins, 2 losses. Currently, they have Chase Hooper a massive favorite, minus 360 odds, as we're used to seeing next to Chase Hooper's name. The underdog price tag on Lance Gibson Jr. currently sits at plus 295.
Chase Hooper's still only 26 years old, man. This guy has been in the UFC for a long time and he's only 26. I wonder what he's going to look like when he's 29, 30. I think he's improving. I think he's clearly improving. I still feel like he's got a lot of the same issues he's had since day one, but I do think he's improving ever so slightly. I don't think he's ever going to become a good striker or anything like that, especially defensively, but I am interested to see him in 3-4 years. You know, where is he going to be when he's 30 years old? Because I do think he can continue to improve. In this fight, he's fighting Lance Gibson, who is not a great fighter, but has a good wrestling skill set. He's a good wrestler. He's a strong wrestler. And one thing about Chase Hooper is if he can't get you to the ground, he's never going to cover this price tag of minus 350 or whatever it was when I announced the intro. Like, he's a massive favorite here. And for him to look a massive favorite, he needs to get the fight to the ground. I don't think he's going to be able to take Lance Gibson down, at least early. Lance Gibson is a good wrestler in his own right, and he's much stronger than Chase Hooper. And he's a fully grown man, and he's been training wrestling all his life. It's going to be a very tough task for Chase to take him down early. And I honestly don't think he will. I mean, I listened to one of Chase Hooper's interviews, and even himself said, yeah, he thinks he's going to win via submission, and he thinks he's going to get a takedown off a caught kick. So, you know, even himself is like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to take this guy down. He's going to have to kick me and I'm going to have to trip him up or something. And that is the way I see Chase getting this to the ground. You know, maybe Lance even shoots a takedown because Chase's, you know, heavy pressure style can invite his opponent to shoot a takedown. It can also invite his opponents to land a missile on his chin and knock him out, which has happened multiple times, or knock him down. You know, you go back to the Caceres fight on one of his early fights. You go back to his most recent fight, Alexander Hernandez. Like, a lot of fighters have hurt him on the feet. But a lot of fighters do end up, you know, succumbing to the pressure a little bit, because Chase will throw a lot of volume. He'll walk forward. He'll chase you around the octagon, sometimes to his detriment, as I said. But fighters can panic when that happens. Like, damn, this guy's throwing so much at me. It's kind of annoying. It's not very powerful, but it's very annoying. Like, it's teep to the body, you know, head kick, multiple punches, Superman punches, stuff like that. Let me just shoot a takedown. And that's where he can kind of anti-wrestle you, counter-grapple you, and get on top. Outside of that, like he said, he's going to need to catch a kick or, you know, maybe get a body lock and jump on the back from the body lock from standing, something like that. I do feel like as the fight gets into round 2 and round 3, Chase Hooper's aggressive style and unorthodox style does often bewilder his opponents, and he is able to get top time in his game going. And that is how I see this fight going here, because I don't think Lance Gibson has great fight IQ. I don't think he's a great fighter overall, and I don't even know if he's UFC level, so he may be a little bit like, I think his wrestling is good for the UFC, but in terms of an overall MMA package, I don't think it's that good. So I kind of feel like we're going to see that exposed in round 2 and round 3, and Chase is going to end up getting on top somehow and probably finishing him via submission. And Chase is very, very good on top. You know, for all the criticism I have of him, when he does get on top, he's one of the best in the division. Like, let's be realistic. He actually is one of the best in the division. He seems to be adding ground and pound to his arsenal now. Whereas when he first came in, he was more of a jiu-jitsu guy. You know, the brutal ground and pound over Slava claws. He landed some good ground and pound on Jim Miller as well. So I feel like he's improving in that realm. And if he lands a few elbows on top position, he's probably able to get under the chin and submit Lance Gibson Jr. So that's what my prediction will be. But there's no way you play Chase Hooper money line. If there was a gun to my head and people said, what's the value side? I'd say Lance Gibson Jr. easily. You know, I'm going to think about this one a little bit more. I'm going to watch a little bit more tape. I specifically want to see how Lance does in these jiu-jitsu scenarios and how often he shoots against fighters with good jiu-jitsu. It's not easy to see because a lot of these fighters on his record, I don't know. You know, he did fight in Bellator. I know a few fighters there. But from what I've seen, I do kind of feel like he's going to make a mistake in round 2 and round 3, and Chase Hooper's going to get on top and finish the fight. But I'm not confident in minus 350 Chase Hooper money line. I think it's kind of ridiculous, and Lance Gibson should be close. It should be more closely lined, you know. So maybe you can play Lance Gibson money line at a massive price, and then Chase Hooper inside the distance, or Chase Hooper round 2 and round 3. You can do like a little hedge bet there if you want. But for the most part, boys, I'm not really having much interest in this fight from a betting perspective at the moment. But we're 11, 12 days out from the fight as I record this, so a lot can change. It probably will change. I'm going to look into it more, as I said, the tape side on Gibson. And outside of that, my prediction will be Chase Hooper to win in round 2 or round 3. And I'll say it's via submission.
Next up, we have Navajo Stirling, the undefeated City kickboxing prospect, taking on Bruno Lopes. Navajo Stirling is the 8-0. Navajo Stirling has a shiny record, 8-0, undefeated. Bruno Lopes, on the other hand, 14 wins, 2 losses. So double the amount of fights as Navajo Stirling. However, Navajo Stirling, a massive favorite, a minus 425 with the underdog price tag on Bruno Lopes sitting at plus 355 odds.
So is Navajo going to get his first knockout of his UFC career here? I mean, at the end of the day, you know what the UFC are doing. You know, I always see people saying, oh, the UFC are trying to get this guy a win, and then they base their whole bet around that. I've always said, like, why do you care what the UFC wants to do? You know, what you should be doing as an MMA bettor, as we all are here, trying to make money on the sport, is we need to be doing a tape study, tape research ourselves, and come into a conclusion on who we think is going to win the fight. And then we look at the odds, and then we base the odds on our prediction, and then we make a bet based on that. You know, we don't look at, oh, the UFC wants this guy to win, so I'm going to bet on him. That's what amateurs do. But I will say this. If you know the UFC want to build a specific fighter, right? And then you do the tape study, and then you can see, oh yeah, that fighter's going to win. It should give you more confidence, because it's like the UFC want a specific scenario to happen, which you think is going to happen, confirmed by your tape study. That's just a nice bonus, right? And when I watch this fight, when I research this fight, I'm looking at like, Navajo's probably going to chin him, man. And then I think, what did the UFC want? The UFC want Navajo to chin him. The UFC desperately want Navajo to get a knockout, and that's why they're lining him up with someone like Bruno Lopes, who's not a bad fighter overall. He's just got a bad chin issue. You know, he's been knocked out by Brenson Ribeiro and Dustin Jacoby. Both of those guys don't notoriously hit that hard. Yeah, Dustin Jacoby's got some knockouts in his recent career towards the latter stage of his career, but who have they really been against? They've been against Vitor Petrino, who we know has a chin issue. They've been against Julius Walker, who had his second UFC fight, was way in over his head in that fight, and they've been against Bruno Lopes. You know, so I don't think like Justin Jacoby's this massive power puncher, honestly, I really don't. And then Brenson Ribeiro, I don't even know if he's with the UFC anymore. He's not a good fighter. So he got knocked out by those two guys. Navajo Stirling is a very good striker. He should knock out Bruno Lopes here. And that's most of my take. You know, I could go deep on Navajo Stirling and, you know, Bruno Lopes and how they match up, but I just feel like at this point in their career, Navajo Stirling is young, fresh, coming into the game. He's very physical. He's got smart striking, patient striking. And I think finally he's going to get his first UFC knockout. You know, I had fought that in his last fight against Bellato, but as we know, Bellato is a very tough fighter, and you need to put him out. Otherwise, you're not really going to look good in that fight. And I don't think he looked great in that fight, but he still won every round. And I think he's improving. And I honestly think we haven't seen the best from Navajo Stirling yet. I think he's a confidence-based fighter as well. I think once he starts getting these knockouts in the UFC, I think you're going to see more and more from him. I think you're going to see a better skill set from him. I think you're going to see a more composed, confident performance from him once he feels more comfortable in there. And a lot of that comfortability will come from the knockouts. You know, when you're getting these knockouts, which I think he's going to get this weekend, you start to be able to open up, have more confidence in yourself, and your entire striking and MMA skill set opens up. So I feel like that's the start of something for Navajo here. I think he gets a knockout here. I may be a little bit biased. I do live in New Zealand, Navajo's home country. I know people who train with Navajo. I'm rooting for him. I hope he wins. But ultimately, being as unbiased as I can be, and I think I am, I genuinely think Navajo gets a knockout in this fight. Something that I like is that Navajo is on the same card as Israel Adesanya. They're good friends. They're training together every single day. They're sparring together every week. And I think that's going to give Navajo confidence moving into the fight card, you know, fighting on the same card as Izzy. I mean, Izzy's headliner. Izzy's a star. He's the biggest fighter at the gym. Yeah, I think it's going to give him confidence. And I think he's going to get a knockout in this fight.
Another women's MMA fight up next. Alexia Thainara taking on Bruna, Brasil. Thainara coming into this fight, 13 wins, 1 loss. Bruna, Brasil, on the other hand, 11 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw. Currently, they have Thainara, a very big favorite at minus 450 with the underdog price tag on Bruna, Brasil sitting at plus 350.
So this is a super weird one, boys, because when I'm looking at this, the fight was meant to be Nicole Cagliari Cagliari versus Carol Foro. Then Cagliari withdrew. Then Stephanie Luciano stepped in to fight Foro. Then Foro withdrew from that fight. So then Alexia Thainara stepped in to fight Luciano. But then Luciano withdrew from that fight. So now Bruno Brasil steps in to fight Alexia Thainara. So we've gone all around the women's MMA division and we've ended up with this fight. So both fighters are coming into this fight on short notice, but it's Thainara who has the deeper camp because she was meant to fight Luciano. Luciano ended up withdrawing, so Bruno Brasil is like the late notice replacement. So much so that she's only coming into this fight on about 2 weeks' notice. And honestly, boys, it's only going to make her task harder. She would lose if these girls had a full camp, in my opinion, anyway. And considering that Bruno Brasil is coming into this fight on 2 weeks' notice, even if Thainara doesn't have that much notice, I think it's just going to make it an easier fight for Thainara. I got Thainara all day in this one, and I'm going to tell you why. This fight is a battle of physicality for me, and Thainara is actually a very good prospect in the women's MMA division. I think she can go quite far, and she is just extremely physical for her division. She's very aggressive. She seems to have good cardio, even with her physicality and aggression. She's a good athlete. I mean, if you are those things, what I just mentioned in women's MMA, you're going to basically become champion or top 5. And that's actually where I think Thainara goes. I think she does reach the top 5 of the division. If not top 5, then top 10, you know? And if she does that, she's going to batter Bruno Brasil here. And that's what I think she does. Bruno Brasil doesn't have the physicality, doesn't have the strength, doesn't have the skill to stop Thainara's forward movements, power shots, wrestling if she wants it. And on the mat, it's kind of like a levels fight. I think Bruno Brasil on bottom does not have the skill to stop Thainara, move into full mount, attacking submissions, ground and pound. Like Thainara can win however she wants it. I honestly think she can win via knockout on the feet, or more likely she's going to go to the wrestling at some point, get a takedown, and just use her physicality and skill on the mat to just dominate her physically and finish the fight. So I'm actually predicting an inside the distance win here, a stoppage win for Alexia Thainara. Worst case scenario, she just wins a decision, you know. So Bruno Brasil might look good early, you know, she's got some good teep kicks up the middle. Her footwork isn't that bad. She can probably stay safe for round 1, but I think in round 2 and round 3, we're just going to see Thainara dominate her physically. And that's my prediction. Thainara wins this one via stoppage. I'm going to say submission.
Very exciting fight up next. We have Ignacio Bahamondes taking on Tofiq Musayev. Bahamondes coming into this fight. Extensive record at this point in time. 17 wins, 6 losses. A lot of experience in the UFC. Tofiq Musayev coming off a loss to Miktabek Orobai, making his second fight in the UFC, has a record of 22 wins, 6 losses. Currently they have Ignacio Bahamondes as a big favorite, minus 265 odds, with the underdog price tag on Tofiq Musayev sitting at plus 225.
Yeah, strange fight, boys. Tough one for me to call. I mean, obviously Musayev had a poor performance against Orobai in his debut, but I predicted that to happen. It wasn't a surprise for me that happened, so I'm not really going to factor that too much into my capping, honestly. And I think the line is factoring that in. You know, at the end of the day, man, like Orobai is one of the best fighters in the division. Like, let's be real. I genuinely believe that. Orobai has obviously moved up in weight now, so he's a big man. That was done at a catch weight as well. So it was hard enough going into that fight. It was in over his head in that fight. And Tofiq just doesn't have the wrestling or grappling to deal with him. And he was off a long layoff. He was 34 years old at the time. He basically had to get a knockout early to win that fight. So I don't think it's a massive mark on him. In this fight, it's going to be way easier for him, in my opinion. Like, it's an easier matchup because he's not going to get run over in the wrestling. He's not going to get run over in the grappling. The pace and pressure isn't going to melt him because Tofiq can get tired and he does melt from pace and pressure at times. Bahamondes doesn't really push a crazy pace or pressure. He definitely can push a good pace with the striking, but I don't think it's the same as pushing the pace in the wrestling. I don't think you break from striking pace because the thing is, Bahamondes doesn't really walk forward and do a crazy pace and pressure game. He throws a lot of volume, but it's easier to deal with than crazy pace and pressure, at least for Tofiq. I think Tofiq's going to have a chance to crack him on the chin and drop him in this fight. I really do. I don't think he's going to finish him. Bahamondes is probably the better overall striker, but I think Tofiq hits very hard. I think he's still got his speed about him, and I definitely feel like he can, you know, crack Bahamondes on the chin early. If we speak about the wrestling, I mean, Bahamondes was out-grappled by Rafael Fiziev very easily, taken down multiple times. It wasn't close. So I think Tofiq is probably a better wrestler than Fiziev, and Tofiq can take down Bahamondes. I don't think he can do much with him on top, and in fact, Bahamondes might be able to throw up a guillotine choke, a triangle choke, or an armbar, and maybe even sweep him. I do think he's quite tricky from his guard, as we've seen in the Turner fight, and just in general, he's got long arms, he's got some good dash chokes and stuff. So I do feel like he knows what he's doing down there. But I think, Tofiq can maybe take him down, keep him down for a minute and win around that way. So I don't think the line should be that wide. Tofiq has outs to win the fight. Some grappling upside. The only one with wrestling upside probably hits harder. But overall, I do think Bahamondes is a better striker. I think he understands the striking game a little bit better. I think he's just way younger, way more in his prime. Tofiq is getting old at this point in time. Tofiq's 36 now, so it actually means when he fought Orobai, he was 35, not 34. So he's 36 years old, coming in off an embarrassing loss in his last fight. He ain't going to have much confidence moving into this fight, or I would assume he won't. First fight in the UFC, got dominated, but the debut is out the way now, so maybe he's going to perform better here. But at 36, do you expect to see a good performance from Tofiq Musayev? I think he's a good fighter, and I think he was good in his day. It's just hard to trust him at 36 years old in the lightweight division against someone who's probably going to be improving and a mainstay in the UFC for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Bahamondes is 28 years old, so he's going to be young and improving, and I think Musayev's going to be getting worse. So that's kind of what's keeping me off playing Musayev as an underdog at the moment. But I definitely think the line's wide here. I would make Bahamondes like a minus 150 favorite. I wouldn't make him, a massive favorite like he is now. So I'm just going to monitor things. I might do a little bit more tape study on this one, boys. It's just hard to know where Musayev is in 2026. Coming off a beatdown from Orobai in his UFC debut. Never fought in the UFC before. Stricter drug testing here. He's not in his home country fighting anymore, and I think his best days are behind him. So it's tough to back up Tofiq, but I think the line's wide here. So then now you ask me, James, who do you pick? I mean, look, I guess I pick Bahamondes as a pure pick, even though they mean absolutely nothing to my bankroll. Picks mean nothing, like I always say. I will pick Bahamondes, though. I do think he should be a favorite, minus 150, but maybe I bet Tofiq. This is why I say every single week, boys, picks are not bets, and sometimes I bet against my pick. And if you want to know my bets, then go to the Elite Zone, sublaunch.com/lucrative MMA. You can sign up with me and get everything there. At the moment, I'm going to pass on this fight. My prediction will be Bahamondes wins via decision, but we'll see. We'll see what my actual bet is come fight time.
Next up, we have Ricky Simón taking on Adrian Yanez in a pretty fun bantamweight scrap. Ricky Simón coming into this fight, extensive MMA record. I mean, he's a UFC veteran at this point. 22 wins, 7 losses. Adrian Yanez is honestly moving into that UFC veteran status himself. This will be his 10th fight in the UFC. Currently, to have Ricky Simón as a slight favorite, minus 150 odds, with the underdog price tag on Adrian Yanez sitting at plus 130.
Weird fight for me, boys. Really weird fight. I mean, both guys who have probably seen their best days in the UFC. Let's be honest. I don't think Yanez is improving that much now. I think we've seen his ceiling. Knocked out in round 1 by Rob Font showed us that he wasn't at that level. And you could say anyone gets knocked out in round 1, it can happen, which is true. But then his subsequent fight against Jonathan Martinez, who I would put around the same ranks of Rob Font, maybe never reached the heights of Rob Font, but I do feel like they're a very similar level in terms of skill set. I mean, that would be a very good fight, Rob Font versus Jonathan Martinez. I'd probably take Jonathan Martinez to win that fight, actually. I know Rob Font's a little bit past it now, but anyway, you get what I'm trying to say. Both similar level fighters, and then, he got easily beat in that fight. Jonathan Martinez finished him with leg kicks. It wasn't a competitive fight. So those two fights really showed us Yanez level. He then fights Vinicius Salvador. Again, massive step down in the competition, is able to get a win there. Then he takes a step up to someone who's below the level of Rob Font and Jonathan Martinez, but still a good fighter, Daniel Marcos, and he loses the fight. Split decision, but I think he deserved to lose. It was pretty clear loss in my opinion. Close fight, competitive fight, but clear loss. And so that's his level. That's his level. Ricky Simón, I feel like, is a level above Adrian Yanez, but I also feel like Ricky Simón has been on a downslide in the last 4 years. I really believe that. He went on a 3-fight losing streak to 3 of the best fighters in the division, top 10 guys. Then he went on a little 2-fight win streak against Javid Basharat and Cameron Smotherman. And then you saw his true level, which was against Raoni Barcelos in a very close fight, but one that he clearly lost. Barcelos was like one of the best fighters in 2025, so I don't hold that against him too much. But again, we know Ricky's level now, and we know Yanez's level. I honestly feel like Ricky is a level above Yanez, and when it's all said and done, Ricky would have had better wins, better performances, and he will be a better fighter overall. But I also feel like this is a very competitive fight, and anyone can win it on their day. Especially stylistically, Yanez has pretty decent takedown defense. It's never actually been tested that much by really good wrestlers. But I also feel like Ricky gets more tired than he used to. Ricky used to have a crazy pace, man. He used to be able to wrestle for 3 rounds and shoot 30 takedowns in a 3-round fight. I don't think he can do that anymore. I think he gets tired now. He looked tired in that Barcelos fight. He looked a bit tired in the Smotherman fight. I didn't think that was a good performance, to be honest. And the fight before that, he knocked out Javid in round 1. But the few fights before that, you know, he looked quite poor against very high-level guys, I will say. So I don't really know where Ricky's at. You know, I don't know where his level is at. Yeah, he was above Yanez, but I feel like now, stylistically as well, it's a very even fight. So it's a fight I want nothing to do with. You know, it's an ugly fight. I lean Ricky because I just think he's better overall. And like I said, prime for prime, Ricky wins. Clearly, easily, maybe. But the thing is like, no one's pushed the pace on Adrian Yanez. No one has really tried to wrestle him outside of Daniel Marcos. And he was able to get takedowns there. He did have success in the wrestling. So I think Ricky can have success. But outside of that, it's just never been tested by a relentless wrestler with the same style as Ricky. So it's really hard to see how Yanez will do. So it's just a weird fight, boys, you know? I'm going to maybe go through more tape, but from the tape I watched, no one was really trying to wrestle Yanez outside of Marcos, and no one could really get him down. So it's hard to say how he's going to do on bottom in that body lock position up against the cage, etc., etc. I'll pick Ricky Simón here. I think he's the better fighter. Ricky Simón via decision will be my pick, but I'm not confident at this point in time, and my pick honestly may flip. My bet is something else, but my pick may even flip. I want to do more tape study on Yanez specifically, to be honest. But yeah, Ricky decision for this video right now, but that's a low confidence pick, and maybe wait till next week to find out my official or my updated prediction.
Next up, Marcin Tybura is taking on newcomer Tyrell Fortune. Marcin Tybura coming into this fight with a record of 27 wins, 10 losses. Tyrell Fortune, on the other hand, 17 wins, only 3 losses. Very closely lined fight, boys. Currently, we have Tyrell Fortune sitting as the -118 favorite with the underdog price tag, if you want to call it that, on Marcin Tybura sitting at -102 odds.
Weird fight. Weirdest fight on the board. I don't know why Tyrell Fortune is in the UFC. I mean, he's got some really bad losses. All right, not the worst losses ever, but when you're getting beat by Linton Vassell, who's a good fighter, honestly, but, you know, you're getting beat by Linton Vassell, knocked out by Timothy Johnson in round 1, finished by a heel hook by Sergey. That's a bad look. And even in their first fight, he was not looking good. I mean, I don't know how you then make it to the UFC, bypassing contenders, etc., etc. I think it really just comes down to the state of the heavyweight division, and, you know, it's not in a good state, so they want fighters. But this is a very weird fight. He's facing off against Marcin Tybura, who seems to be on a downtrend in his career. Last fight got knocked out easily by Ante Delia. The fight before that, he did win against Mick Parkin, but I don't think he looked great in that fight. I think he looked quite poor, to be honest, and it was a very close fight, and arguably Mick Parkin won that fight. Fight before that against Yonata Deniz, he got hurt in that fight badly, then was able to get on top and dominate Deniz, but outside, you know, before that he was hurt. Fight before that, he got armbarred by Sergey Spivak in round 1, which was a terrible, terrible look in my opinion. He's 40 years old now. I don't think Marcin is what he once was. I really don't. You know, I really, really don't. I would not be surprised to see Tyrell Fortune come in here and finish him in round 1. He's very athletic. He hits hard, at least for a heavyweight. You know, he's not some crazy athlete, but like for heavyweight, he's a pretty good athlete. He can move, and he does have power, and he could just crack Marcin early and knock him out. We've seen Marcin knocked out early and finished in round 1 so many times now. Why can't it happen again? You know, a newcomer to the UFC, Delia did it in his last fight. I feel like Fortune can do it here. If Marcin is able to weather the storm for the first couple of minutes and get on top, he could absolutely dominate Tyrell Fortune on top. I mean, he got reversed. He got dominated on the ground by Linton Vassell, reversed in some really bad positions when Vassell had no gas at all. Go back and watch that fight and see some of the grappling scenarios. I know Vassell has made an entire career out of some reversals when he's tired and getting on top, but it still isn't a good look when your opponent has zero gas, but somehow you're still getting reversed. It also is a terrible look getting heel hooked up at heavyweight by Sergey. That's a very, very bad look in my opinion. So I don't think this guy's jiu-jitsu is that good. And one thing that Tybura does have is a heavy top game and good jiu-jitsu. So if he is able to weather the storm for the first 2 and 3 minutes and get him on the ground, he can finish him. I honestly feel like this fight is very similar to Deniz versus Tybura, where Tybura is probably going to get hurt early, may come back though, but may not. Could just be a knockout round 1. So I don't mind the under 1.5 in this fight. I just feel like there's a lot of finishing upside in round 1 for both fighters, and even in round 2. I definitely feel like if it goes over 1.5, I think it goes to decision, right? So it could look bad if you bet the other one under 1.5 and it doesn't hit. then it's going to go to decision. And it's like, oh, this fight was never going to hit under 1.5 because it went to a decision. But in reality, it probably goes under 1.5 loads of times. But if it doesn't, it goes to decision. A lot of heavyweight fights are like that, boys. If it ends up going over 1.5, it just ends up going to a decision. And I kind of feel like here, I see a lot of danger early, but I could also see a fat heavyweight blob contest where it just goes to decision when both guys are extremely tired, like Linton Vassell versus Tyrell Fortune. So yeah, it's a tough one for me, boys. I mean, it's an ugly, ugly fight. I'm going to take Tyrell Fortune to come in here, have a highlight reel knockout over Marcin Tybura, because you can do that to him. Maybe a bit of hype builds around Tyrell, but I don't actually think he's on the level. But maybe, you know, some UFC fans think he is, and then maybe we bet against him in the future or something like that. No disrespect to him. I just don't think his skill set is super high level. But you don't have to be a high level skilled fighter to be good in the UFC heavyweight division, honestly. That is my prediction. Tyrell Fortune, knockout in round 1. But I could see either fighter getting a finish. It's an ugly fight. You know my prediction based on the last 5 minutes of chat. But yeah, I will go Tyrell round 1. So that's it. Thank you for watching the show, boys. Let's cash this weekend. And as I mentioned, if you want all of my picks and mainly my bets, then the link is in the bio for that. Also, what is in the bio is my free Telegram group. You can join that for free, and I actually give out free bets and free breakdowns that I do not give out on my YouTube channel or any of my social media. So click either of those links if you want to join. And that's it, boys. Peace and love. I'll see you in the next one.